So let me go ahead and I'm going to show you a few different slides. It's going to be very quick, but today's mainly going to be focused on playing a game, actually. And I'm going to introduce you to the game, and then in your free time, if you ever want to play it, I can send you the link and you can play it on your own. All right, so per usual, my name's Alan Ivory. I'm an ecologist. So my entire study is how plants and animals and the world around you all interact, which is perfect for food chains. So let me go and show a few different food chains and how it all works. As you may or may not already know, it's basically the chain of how energy or how different things eat one another. So it can start out at producers, but it really starts out at the sun. The sun gives energy through like light energy to the grass, and then grasshoppers or rabbits will eat that grass. And then the grasshopper or the rabbit will get eaten by something. In this case, we're talking about frogs. Frogs will eat the grasshopper, getting its food that way. And then a snake will eat the frog, getting its nutrients that way. And then the hawk will eat the snake. And then full circle, you get down to decomposers like fungi who will break down those nutrients and get nutrients for those plants again. And so it's just a full cycle. So it can be something as simple as a rat eating corn and then the owl eating the rat. It can get a little more difficult where the fox eats a rabbit, the rabbit eats the carrot, and then that fox is getting eaten by the lion. But it can be super complicated sometimes whenever you get into like food webs. So where it's like multiple things can eat the same thing. It can just get very complicated that sometimes. So we're gonna focus on some simpler options today. All right, so let me go ahead and show you this game. I've been playing it on my free time for quite a while now. So it's this thing right here. So this is what's called a simulation. And we're gonna simulate different scenarios. So the first thing we're gonna simulate is we're gonna only have grass. So this area on our right here is our ecosystem. So if I click right here, this is just grass. And it's gonna go by days. So we're on day 0 right now, but if I hit run, these days are gonna start going until it gets to 100. And so you can see this graph down below. We started at about 5,000 plants, but it really quickly took off to 10,000 plants, and it stayed there for a long time. It stays there for the full 100 days. So that means that there was a lot of that grass taking over this ecosystem. So now let's add a rabbit into this scenario. So now this rabbit is gonna eat this grass. So let's see what happens now. The rabbits are eating the grass. There's still plenty of grass and there's still plenty of rabbits. So if we look at the graph down below, once it gets done to day 200, we look down below, you'll see the plants went down by a lot, but then it spiked back up. So what was happening is the rabbits were eating all the grass, and then the rabbits ate so much grass that there wasn't enough grass for the rabbits to eat, until eventually they balanced out to where there was a healthy amount of both plants and animals. So now let's make it a little bit more complicated again, and we'll make it to where there's a predator who's eating the rabbit. Let's see what happens now. So now the predator is eating all the rabbits, but the rabbits are eating the grass. So let's see what happens overall. There's less rabbits now. All right, so we look at this graph, we can see that once a predator was introduced, so you can see the predator was introduced right here, there was more grass and slightly less rabbits, but the predators were able to get a little bit. There was not very many predators, but there's still some. So it kind of shows how in a balance, there can be a little bit of everything. But now let's see what happens if we add in another animal to eat this grass that doesn't get eaten by a predator. This is what we'll talk about as an invasive species, where there's nothing that's going to eat this animal, but it eats other things. So let's see what happens now. All right, so now you can see that there's no predators whatsoever. Now, you might ask yourself, why would that be the case? Why would there be no predators? All we did, he can still eat things. What did we do that caused the problem? What caused the problem is these snails were eating all of the grass, the same way the rabbits were eating the grass, so there wasn't enough grass for both of those things to thrive in a large amount. And so there's less rabbits for that predator to eat. And so removing the food source, removing that producer, ended up affecting this top predator. So if we were to remove this animal again and put predators back on the map, let's see if they can recuperate, if they can bounce back up. Now you can see that there's plenty of rabbits again, there's plenty of grass again, and the predator was able to stay for the full time this time. Which I think is pretty neat, right? Let's see if I had anything else to show you. Oh yeah. So another alternative is if the predator can't eat the invasive species, what if we add another animal into the scenario that can eat that species? So in this case, we're going to say that squirrels eat snails. They don't really do that in the real world, but for this example, let's use it. Let's see what happens now. Well, that didn't work like I expected. I was hoping that this squirrel would eat enough. Let's try this again. I think we try it again, it'll happen. It didn't happen, never mind. Well, you would expect usually in the real world that if you add a predator that eats the invasive species, that you would end up eliminating that invasive species and helping the native animals of that area. So we can go back to something like this where, reset. We can go back to something like this where the rabbits and the predators can all live in harmony with the grass. No one's getting eliminated because of an invasive species. I just want to show you that how different ecosystems can be very interdependent. They need each other to thrive. All right, that's all I wanted to go and show you. Maybe I could share this link with you if you wanted to go and add in other things, add in different plants, or add in other animals like this deer to eat certain things. You can get very complicated this if you wanted to, but I like to keep it very simple with the rabbit, the grass, and the predator. You can add in other stuff too. All right. Now, if you have any questions, now's the time. You can either unmute yourself and ask that way, or you can ask in chat. I tried to keep the food web as easy as possible, or the food chain as easy as possible, but if you have more questions about it, I'm more than happy to answer it. No questions?
Okay, thank you, Aubrey.
Why were the numbers always spiking up and down?
So it takes a long time for things to get in balance. So if you introduce something new to an area, it'll sometimes cause things to spike down, and then it might take a while to find out the balance. So think about it like this: if there's there's 10,000 squirrels in one forest and only a single wolf, or sorry, maybe there's 5 wolves. Those 5 wolves can eat as many squirrels as they want. Well, they might eat too many squirrels, and we may go down to really few amount of squirrels. So maybe get down to a few hundred squirrels where these wolves don't have enough to eat, and so you might end up having these wolves die off. And so it might take a while for those numbers to balance out. You might have too much at some point or too little at some point, but it may take hundreds of years or 1,000 years to find the right balance of squirrels to wolves. That's just an example, but those were the spikes are there. What kind of animals eat a bear? Bears are usually the top predator in an ecosystem. Now, our Florida bears, they mainly eat berries for the most part. They might eat a dead animal if it's already dead, or they might protect their cubs and kill an animal that way. But for the most part, they eat berries and other vegetation.
You're going to say it very loudly. There, speak up.
when a predator eats something that eats the grass and gets energy, and that thing runs and then it gets eaten, would this energy lose on the predator, or will it still have its energy?
So you're saying if the predator dies, I want to make sure I hear you right.
Predator dies
Yeah.
or the prey dies?
The predator
Okay.
does.
So, so yes, the energy would still be in that system. So what would happen is if you go back to this slide here, if the hawk dies here, and the hawk is the final biggest predator here, the decomposers like the fungi or different bacteria can break down, in this case, the wolf or the hawk, and it can give nutrients to that grass. So energy is almost never lost except through like heat. Heat is usually the only way that energy is lost. But for the most part, energy can always be cycled through in different ways. Conservation of energy. Talking about energy, I have another game I want to show you. I forgot about it earlier. So this game right here, all it is, it's another kind of simulation in a way, where you're a frog and your entire mission is to get to this water. So this grass right here is just the land that you live in or the land you have to cross. So whenever there's nothing in your way, you can just go in a straight line and get straight to that water. So in here, it took me 25 moves to get that done. But now let's say that there's a few houses that are in our way. Maybe talk about development. This is just the amount of available habitat. So I can go straight for a second, but then something got my way. So I can go straight again for a little while. And something got my way again. So instead of 25 moves, it would be 27 moves. So not too much more energy was spent, but a little bit. Let's take this a little bit more. All right. So right away, there's something in my way. Something's in my way again. I got to go around it. All right, another one. All right, now we're to the shore. It took me 29 moves this time. So again, slightly more moves, but it's not the end of the world. We'll put it down one more time to 75%. So that means 75% of the land is still available. That's still a lot of land, you think, right? So 75%. 30 moves this time. Again, slightly more. I'm only gonna do this a few more times. Yeah, once you go from 75% down to 70%, I don't know if I'll be able to get all the way through. Let's see if I can find a path. This is like a maze at this point. "38 moves. You can see how little change I had to do in order to make it almost impossible for this frog to reach the water. And for certain animals, at different times in their life, they need different places to live. So a frog, for example, it starts his life out in the water, not the ocean, but in like a pond, but it lives the rest of its life on land. And so being able to travel from one place to another is very important. And again, I started at 100%, but I only went down to 70% of land remaining. If I even go down to 50%, absolutely impossible for me to get through. Let's see if I go to 60%, can I go through? There is a way for me to get through. If I go down here, I can get through. But again, it's gonna take a lot more energy for me to be able to do this. And along this journey, I might get hit by a car, or maybe a hawk flies by and eats me, versus normally I'd be able to get to my destination and be done. So again, see how it takes a lot more energy to get things done. All right, any other questions now?
Okay, Emily.
When you were moving around that little wolf and those little bugs, can a predator be like those little bugs, or is it a wolf or any type of big animal who's trying to hunt for food?
So those little, the places that I was calling land, we could go and call those predators too. And if you add too many predators, then yeah, that frog would die. And that happens all the time. It's another invasive species thing. If you go down to the Everglades of Florida, down to South Florida with all that marshes, people will release this snake called a Burmese Python, and it can grow to be like 25 feet long sometimes. So it's a super huge snake. Before, alligators or panthers or raccoons, they could go all throughout the Everglades as free as they wanted to. But eventually those Burmese pythons started to take off and eat, and they had to eat the raccoons or panthers that we want to talk about. So yeah, you can call those little dots a predator, and the more of those dots there are, the more those little frogs are going to die. All right, so in chat, there's what's the largest frog? To answer that question, it's an African frog called the Goliath frog, and they can be almost 2 feet long and weigh like 5 pounds. Super big frog.
Okay,
So if there's some animals and why can't some animals eat other animals? Like if it's like when you showed us the simulation, if it showed the predator wouldn't eat one animal, but it would eat the others.
So some animals, like some small animals or really any animal, they can have protection. So maybe a turtle, how it has a shell, it might be hard for a raccoon or for a bear to maybe eat through that because that hard shell, but another animal might be able to. So a good example would be like a raccoon can eat that shell, but a raccoon can eat a squirrel, but a bear with that bigger jaw can crack through that shell. Another example of that is with turtles. So out in the ocean, there's sea turtles, which is something that I've studied quite a bit. And some turtles' jaws are meant to go and catch jellyfish. So there's no muscle on that jaw. So it can only eat jellyfish, it can't crack through shells. Other turtles, like the loggerhead sea turtle, it has an enormous jaw that can crack through shells. Why would that be important? Well, there's those big conch shells in the ocean or snails in the ocean, and that big jaw can crack through those shells. So to answer your question, some animals' mouths are only able to eat certain things. Like a cow, it has flat teeth, so it can't really break through skin or eat muscle, so it doesn't eat animals, but it can eat grass. Its jaw is perfectly for eating grass. So different animals can eat different things, and that's why a predator might only eat a certain thing.
Oh, so it just depends on the animal?
It depends on the animal and how that animal was adapted or how it evolved throughout thousands of years. If it's a cow, its mouth is made to eat grass. If it's a bear, its mouth is good at picking out berries or eating a predator or eating an animal if it needs to. Or if it's a panther, it has sharp, big teeth, like canine teeth, that can eat an animal.
That makes sense.
So different animals eat different things. All right, what do jellyfish eat? Jellyfish usually filter feed. So it'll go and suck in water and get like either plankton out of the water or other nutrients out of the water. But they have those stingers. So if someone tries to eat it, it can sting them, like put those little tentacles on it and sting them to make sure they don't get eaten.
Amelia just asked.
Is there like a type of big dog that's bigger than any other dog?
Biggest dog. Well, coyotes, that's a dog. But you go to wolves, wolves are probably the biggest dog I can think of. And the wolves we have here in the US, they can get pretty big. I mean, bigger than a German Shepherd. But if you go to where it's really cold, like Arctic wolves, they can get massive. I mean, they can be 6 feet long and like panther size. Yeah. So there can be some pretty big dogs.
Okay. Blaine, just unmute and ask your question.
Why did the squirrels die off?
So why did the squirrels die off? So the squirrels were only eating those snails And so since there wasn't enough snails, so basically since two things were competing for the same resource, so both the snails and the rabbit were both trying to eat the grass, there wasn't very many of either of those. And so the animals that were eating the snails and the squirrels both died off because they didn't have enough food to eat. So if the one resource is limited, then everything's gonna get limited. So the squirrels died off because there wasn't enough snails.
Samantha just asked because he can't see your hand.
Why does the animals have to look for food before the winter starts to survive?
So it depends on where you are in the world, they have to go and do that. So if you want to talk about bears in hibernation, where they go and hibernate all throughout winter, that's because as all that snowfall falls to the ground, all of the plants are going to go and die off and they're not going to have berries to eat. And so what they'll do is they'll stockpile as much food as they can before the winter comes because they know their food is going to disappear. And so what they'll do is they'll eat all that food and then they'll hibernate, use as little energy as possible, kind of just go into a sleep for a few months and use as little energy as possible so that all that food that they ate can last them throughout the winter. So it's all about when, like the spring is whenever all the plants start to have all their fruits and stuff. And so they'll stock up during the spring, or they'll stock up on whatever gets harvested during the fall. So certain plants harvest themselves or reproduce during the spring, certain plants reproduce in the fall. And so they'll stock up during those times. Are chickens secondary consumers? So a chicken is eating grain, typically, so they're eating the grass. So I would say they're like a first consumer, right? Now, if a chicken was to eat something else that eats the grass, then it'd be a secondary. You could say you're a secondary if you eat a chicken egg, I guess. Any other questions?
Bless you.
How does prey catch their how does the animals catch their prey when they're looking for it?
Well, everyone is a little bit different. So I'll give you a few different examples. Let's talk about the cheetah for a second. So the cheetah over in Africa, or a leopard over in Africa, they're just so fast that they can just chase after their prey. So let's just say a cheetah wants to eat an impala, like one of those deer over there. The impala can run pretty fast, but the cheetah can run faster. And so one way is just being faster than your prey. Another way is being super sneaky. So there's a shark who's called like a carpet shark. And what they do is they sit on the seafloor and they blend in. They're super sneaky, kind of like a stingray. They'll sit on the bottom of the shore or the bottom of the ocean. And as a fish swims by, they'll wait for them to get very close and then they'll jump up and eat them. So it depends on being sneaky or from being really fast. That's the main two ways.
Okay. Blaine just unmute and asked.
But why would it just jump up? It would just they would notice that and they'd run away.
That's why they wait till they're super close. So let's just say you're like a 4-foot long shark or a 5-foot long shark sit on the ocean floor and you blend in very well. You wait till a fish is within maybe 3 feet of you or 2 feet of you. You're a lot bigger, so you can leap onto them or you can swim a lot faster than them. They just wait till they get very close or the fish is really close to them and they can just make that little bit of movement to catch up to them. So even if they do get seen, it's too late for them to run away. It's kind of like you, whenever you get running, you're slower than whenever you're fully running. So you speed up throughout time. And so it takes a while for that fish to get its momentum to swim very fast.
What do snails eat?
What do snails eat? Is that what your question was?
Yeah.
Okay, so snails, they usually eat algae or that sort of stuff. So tiny little micro algae, like, or small plants, like they're super, super tiny. Snails will suck onto them and just eventually eat them. So they're a, I guess you would say a first consumer. They're eating plants.
What do the sea snails eat?
Sea snails eat the same thing. So I actually have a saltwater fish tank, and I have snails who their entire job in my fish tank is to eat all my algae. So sea snails eat algae too.
What do the tadpoles eat?
Tadpoles. So tadpoles, sometimes they'll eat algae too, kind of like the snail does. Sometimes they'll eat other like mosquito larvae. So the eggs of mosquitoes, they'll come up and suck on the eggs and eat them that way. So tadpoles, they're very good at eating a variety of different things. So either eating plants or really small eggs of other animals.
Okay, say goodbye.
All right, so I'm gonna head and end it here. I had a great time talking to you, and I showed you a few different games. If you want to go and share that with your class or play it yourself, I can send you the links. And I have a few more games I want to go and show you of how science and math are related. So I can go and send you those too, and maybe I can show you another week. But my entire job is adding math and science together, so I can show you that too. Well, I had a great time talking to you. Bye.
Bye.